Welcome to Recalculating Small Business. Like its award-winning book, Recalculating is dedicated to small business in America. Your hosts are Don Mazzella and Dan Perkins. Don Mazzella is the editor-in-chief of the Small Business Digest. Dan Perkins is a registered investment advisor with 43 years' experience in managing money.
Dan Perkins here, your co-host, along with Don Mazzella of Recalculating for Small Business. Our radio program is dedicated to you, helping the small business owners increase their profits. We draw our name from Recalculating, voted the best small business book of 2017 by the Independent Press. In this book, it features ways to grow your small business. Now, here's Don Mazzella.
My co-host, Dan Perkins, is on assignment, but we're fortunate enough today to have Patrick Knight, Senior Director, Cyber Strategy and Technology at Veriato. Patrick, before we go any further, tell us a little bit about your personal background, because it's one of the reasons you're on the show is because it's a fascinating background.
Well, thanks, Don. I appreciate that. Pleasure being on. Thanks for having me. My background, I started out my adult career in the U.S. military and intelligence community in military intelligence, and spent about 12 years doing that with gaining a deep appreciation for what it takes to make something secure and looking at threats from a variety of angles. And that launched my civilian commercial security career, where I've been the last nearly 17 years in a variety of aspects of security, currently in insider threat. And so I love looking at the landscape, trying to find solutions to tough problems, and that's what we're doing here at Veriato.
Spell out your website for our audience.
It's Veriato.com, Veriato.com.
Basically, you deal with cyber threat. I've just come off a weekend of dealing with a cyber attack that destroyed my systems, that I had to bring everything back up. And thank God I had backup. But it's a growing problem for small business. And with that as a background, I'm going to turn it over to you, to Patrick, to talk about how what the problem is and how small businesses can better protect themselves.
Mm-hmm. Well, first off, let me introduce Veriato. So in the spectrum of cyber security, there are a lot of components that organizations are concerned with. They're concerned with blocking threats from coming in from the outside, and many organizations are also concerned with how do you protect the data that we handle internally from being mishandled by employees or bad actors. And so that insider threat component is where I operate currently, and that is the role and the mission of Veriato. However, I did come out of over 12 years or so of dealing with external threats and malware. So it sounds like what you're dealing with is the typical problem that endpoint security solutions have been fighting for decades. And from the sound of it, your comments makes it sound like they still have not won that battle, and that's the ongoing dilemma with blocking malware, blocking ransomware, is that this stuff still gets through, and malware authors are relying on two constants. One, that endpoint security products will still fail to block their malware when it's released, and number two, that human beings can be tricked into doing things that allow the compromise. So, for example, an employee gets an email that has a phishing link or a link to a piece of malware, and all you need is one employee that doesn't read the email clearly or is adequately fooled by it, and then they infect the environment. So those two constants are still at play, and they have empowered the criminal malware industry to stay in power all these years and to be very successful.
You're absolutely right. But since your specialty is the internal one, and all of us are aware of cases, let's talk to your expertise. And just recently at my club, the manager was let go, and they didn't escort him to the door, and he took the time to apparently put a malicious code into the system before leaving. That's one of them. So I've had a lot of real world experience, but I'm just going to turn it over to you and say, what should a company do? How can they protect themselves? And just fire away.
Well, there are a lot of aspects to this question, and number one starts out with identifying what is the need of the organization. What is the organization's mission? For example, a financial institution or a healthcare provider will probably look at insider threats a lot differently than a small business or a manufacturing company. And so the question I ask any organization, any enterprise is, what data do you have that if it walked out the door would seriously damage your environment? And second to that is, what access do your employees have inside that if they could do anything, what damage would that do? And that sounds like the scenario that you just set up pretty well, which is a saboteur. And there have been a couple of headlines in the news recently about this very situation. What tools does an organization typically have to identify a saboteur? There may be certain logging features that can track, what data an employee may have copied or stolen, but to have the level of access to systems that they can actually sabotage it speaks to another vector of risk that enterprises must be aware of. And they, in those cases, you must deploy a technology that can identify and alert to those activities, because those are activities that typically will go unnoticed until long beyond the damage has been enacted.
I'm listening, just absolutely fascinated. But let's just talk. Let's first start with financial and health companies. I just saw a statement that a supplier of to a larger organization was the backdoor through which someone got in and made off with emails and other sensitive financial information. And then it turned out, germane to this discussion, that it was an internal employee at the smaller company that did the hacking. Are the ways of identifying this beforehand, or is it always a matter of finding out after the fact?
Well, if you have active monitoring technology in your environment, you should be able to identify that as it happens. And with some technologies, for example, user behavior analytics, maybe even see signs that something may be leading to a bad activity before it happens. Obviously, people can change their minds if they are planning something damaging, but to be able to alert that the activities of Patrick today are different than the activities of Patrick yesterday would be of incredible value to a lot of organizations that might be concerned with the level of access that I have to the assets and resources of my company. So with that said, without some technology to monitor for those user activities, and anyone that you've allowed access to your network, even through these, as you indicated, a third party, without that technology, then enterprises are typically very blind to the full scope and the full context of any kind of intrusion like this. So you may find, an organization may find eventually that a particular loss of data has happened. What else has occurred? What else led up to that? Or were there other actors involved, internally or externally, that would paint the full picture? Well, without a technology like a user behavior analytics technology or user activity monitoring, then most organizations are going to be blind to the full scope of what the damage is, and perhaps not be able to fully recover or ever understand what the full damage was to begin with.
Well, your company monitors 24/7, and am I correct? And they have ways of spotting criminal activities. Am I right on that, or did I misunderstand?
No, so if I'm allowed to talk about our technology, sure. Our technology is deployed as a software solution on every endpoint that the organization wants to monitor, every endpoint that a user might log on to and conduct activities, whether it's their workstation where they're simply doing their day-to-day emails and chatting, writing documents, or accessing databases or sales information. Or proprietary information, or if they're a scientific organization or a healthcare organization that research or patient data. So the client is a software client that would run as long as the user is logged in, and be able to record and identify any activity that would be considered a risk. For example, I may operate in a healthcare organization, for example, but I may not need access to certain research data. Maybe I only need access to sales or other medical information. There may be compartments to what information I should have access to. So my access to that data that I'm permitted to access should come as no surprise and probably won't cause that much of an alert. But what if tomorrow I started accessing something in a sector of the organization that typically I wouldn't access, that I should be off limits to, but nonetheless have tried to access? Well, that would be an alert that the organization should be concerned with, because it might be a sign that I might be looking to do something bad towards the organization.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people bring it up. I still cannot understand how Snowden could download so much data and no one at the organization realizing what he had done. It still boggles my mind. I've thought.
You're going to hit very close to home for me, since, as I mentioned earlier, my earlier days of my career was in the intelligence community, and that was the agency I worked for. And now the Snowden event did occur after I left. However, I've struggled with that one as well. Obviously, I'm on the outside now, so I'm not privy to that information. But my theory is that after 9/11, the biggest criticism of our government was, why didn't they catch this? Why didn't the intelligence community communicate with each other their own bits and pieces of this bigger problem that occurred on 9/11? And so the outcome of that, I believe, was a loosening of access, not just across intelligence agencies, but very likely internally as well. Now, I don't know what their monitoring posture was. I'm sure that's deeply classified. When I was in employment there, I knew every time I logged into any terminal, there was a login prompt that said that this is a DoD machine and all activities are subject to monitoring, and we were briefed annually on access and the fact that things could be monitored. So we knew it was in the culture. Stuff was being monitored. Now, what happened since then, I actually don't know the answer to that, but it just troubled me as well. But nonetheless, it's also helped frame and shape my thoughts and my sensitivity to what damage an insider can do. Not just an insider with unlimited access, but even insiders with reasonable guidelines and barriers around what data they should access. There's still a lot of damage that they can inflict. So, obviously that helped formulate my thoughts on this topic as well. And thank you for bringing that up.
Well, another subject. I just happened to again see in today's paper that a woman was able to embezzle $500,000 from a local small business without being caught by simply writing checks to herself, and the system that didn't pick it up. I know you're not into fraud, but it would seem to me that part and parcel of having an electronic checking system is the fact that things like that should be checked. Is that fall into your area, or do you have any thoughts on it?
Well, financial fraud is obviously one of our major verticals. However, the scenario that you just described. Let's take this apart for a moment. She was writing checks. So we're talking outside of computer technology to do so. However, at some point, the financial organization has systems that are going to record these transactions. And it was actually the financial industry that has some of the earliest days of user behavior analytics, which was it existed under various terms, but it was leveraging technology to look for anomalies in financial transactions. So going back quite a few years, personally, I had a situation where a credit card or a debit card that I used, and I'm talking more than a decade ago, it had somehow become compromised, and there was a couple of large purchases made in another country. And even dating back then, my financial organization contacted me and said, "Are these yours? Did you do these? Because they look suspicious." And I said, "Why, no, they're not." And so they covered that, they blocked it, and they held presumably held the vendor wherever the transaction occurred accountable. So it's interesting that you brought that up, because I believe the financial organization is where some of the earliest origins of user behavior analytics at a technology level came from, and it's the scope and the need for it. And Snowden is another great example to illustrate how broadly useful this technology is in this day and age. Technology is ubiquitous. It has overtaken every operation at every level of every industry, every major organization you can imagine. And so with that comes a greater risk. And we're looking at Equifax, for example, the great damage that was done there due to an intrusion. We have organizations that have massive amounts of data, and now we're seeing more and more where not only do we need to protect that data from external threats, but also we're seeing more and more the damage that insiders might inflict on that data. And it's because it's just so much volume now that the risk is just exponentially greater than it ever was a decade or 2 decades ago. And so without technology, without some technological layer to help organizations put a handle on what is the scope of the damage that can occur to us if this data were leaked or stolen or walked out the doors due to an insider, without that technology layer, then most organizations would be crippled under their own size to be able to monitor that and to have a reasonable alert or heads up that something is going on, that Patrick is doing something with data that he should not be doing, that is unusual for his typical behaviors. Scope and size is the ultimate enemy here when it comes to being able to deal with any sort of investigation and being able to catch and respond in any reasonable time frame to an intrusion caused by an insider.
We're talking with Patrick Knight of Patrick, your website again?
It's Veriato.com, Veriato.com.
Veriato. I love the name. Do you know how the name came about?
Yes, actually it's a derivative of, I believe, the Latin form for the word veritas, meaning truth. And we believe our technology allows enterprises to see truly what's going on inside their networks in a way that firewalls and endpoint security, while very critical to security, they don't provide this type of information that we provide. So we show the truth of what's going on inside the perimeter.
Many years ago, at least 20, I was told that at a major bank, which has been absorbed, that a coder, a programmer, wrote into a program that a lot of transactions end up with a 0.2 penny, a fraction of a penny, and deposited it to his account. And for several years, I'm told by that department, this man worked quietly away. Then when he had enough money accumulated in the account, he quit and moved to an island in the Caribbean. Is that still possible in today's world? I know it's a true story because for a variety of different reasons, But is something like that still possible? I'm going to turn to a subject, if you don't want to talk about it, but I don't understand blockchain. Um, I freely admit it. I don't understand how you're creating something on a computer and saying it has value. And um, it seems to me that's an industry that's fraught with chances for shenanigans. Am I wrong on that? And if you want to not talk about it, it's fine. But you sound just so knowledgeable. I'd love to hear your comments.
Well, blockchain and cryptocurrencies are a product. They are a market-based product based on volume. The more volume that a particular blockchain cryptocurrency, the more volume it creates, or that is created of it, the market responds and says, "Oh, I find value in that because clearly they're doing a lot of business." It is a very artificially driven thing. I myself am not a financial investor type person. That is not my background, so I too am mystified at how it's so popular. But nonetheless, I was equally as mystified to Facebook's stellar rise. I mean, how could a website be worth the billions that it was presumably valued at? That is clearly beyond my ability to rationalize, but nonetheless, it does happen. I think that's the same phenomenon that's occurring with cryptocurrencies. And my opinion is that it's basically a market-driven frenzy. There was a recent sort of reevaluation of some of the major cryptocurrencies. The ones that were so dramatically increasing in value took a quick dive, and the market presumably settled down a bit. My personal thoughts are that it's still overly valued, but that says a lot about where we are and the delicacy of the financial sector to be able to place so much value on something that has such an intangible. You can't touch it, no more than you could touch Facebook. But the value in Facebook, for example, was valued at how much advertisers were willing to pay just to get into the web pages of all those millions and millions of users. And not only that, then how their data was then ultimately collected and sold around to other advertisers, and that conflation of this of our user data drove up the value of Facebook. Again, it's a very intangible thing. You can't cut a slice of it off and say, "Here's my piece of Facebook," just like you can't cut a slice off of a blockchain and say, "This is mine." You'll never see a Bitcoin because it doesn't technically exist. It is a value based on a computer transaction. So I share your mystification with the frenzy that develops around it. And my concern is more what happens when the market finally does truly see the lack of value. If it does, what does that say about the rest of our stock exchange and the values there? Because most of our stocks, when one sector starts to hit a downturn, it typically has a rippling effect across industries. And I think we saw that when cryptocurrencies took a dive just a couple months back. And I don't think that's the biggest. It's my personal opinion. I don't think that's the biggest turn that they're going to make. So I'm sort of bracing myself. And what does that say about future concepts that have yet to be realized?
Well, I'm glad if someone as smart as you feels that way, then I'm not alone. Thank you. I sit on the board of a medical marijuana dispensary, a nonprofit in New Jersey. And we are required to count every leaf. In New Jersey, we are the most regulated state in the union as it comes to marijuana, and we have to put everything into literally every leaf is counted via the computer system, and the biggest thing people are concerned about, obviously, is how people, the workers. Fortunately, we have not had the problem, but we understand It has happened in other places in New Jersey. There's only 6 dispensaries in New Jersey. But have you had any experience in that area of trying to the big controversy within marijuana industry is how do you go about uh, regulating such a amorphous industry? Do you have any thoughts on that? Again, this is way off your topic, but I thought I'd ask you.
Well, first off, I want to deny all reports that I know anything about medical marijuana. I'm trying to say that facetiously. I'm less concerned about medical marijuana than I am opioids. You're describing an incredible amount of detail in regulating an organic substance that, by my understanding of that industry, there's next to no compared to other narcotics, the downsides and the negative impacts seem to be almost non-existent. I want to caution myself and use, to caveat my statements. I'm not aware of any major epidemics with marijuana addiction, with the destructive side effects of it that compared to opioids and other narcotics. So I don't understand why so much effort is being placed on regulating an organic substance that seems to be no more damaging than alcohol, which has also been legally obtainable for decades. So I would much rather see that level of scrutiny applied to Vicodin and some other mainstream pharmaceuticals that we don't know where that came from. At least you can grow a plant, but I have no idea what goes into the production of what's coming out of the major pharmaceutical industries. Yet they're capitalizing on these substances at incredible profit margins, and yet most consumers have no idea. They're just trusting doctors and the pharmaceutical companies that it won't kill them, and yet we see what's happening there. So I can't really speak much more to the industry and the whys, only that it mystifies me that we seem to be diverting our resources in a place that I don't understand why.
A very wise answer. Thank you. We're talking with Patrick Knight. Patrick, your website again. We've run out of time, and I want to say this has been a very illuminating half hour. But your website, please.
Once again, it's Veriato.com, Veriato, short for truth, and in the original Latin. And I want to thank you. It's been a pleasure, and feel free to have me back on. I love talking.
Well, one more quick question. Do you have a product for small business, or our audience is primarily small business, but do you also provide support for small businesses?
We do, and our flagship technology is called Veriato 360, and it's scalable to the largest organizations that we have. We're truly focusing on large businesses, but we also have our Investigator product, which is a smaller version of 360. Now, 360 can support as few as 10 licenses. So if anyone is interested in this kind of technology to identify risks posed by insiders, then either might be a great solution for you, and certainly look us up on Veriato.com, and that will get you directly to the information you need to contact us.
Patrick, thank you so much for being with us. A link to your website will be on Recalculating Radio tonight. It's recalculating.biz, where you can also tell us get other guests you might like to hear. And again, thank you so much, Patrick Knight, for being with us.
My pleasure.
Dan Perkins here from Recalculating.biz with your featured book. I want to tell you about a recent interview I had with Bob Bethel, a turnaround specialist with lots of success in small business. Bob's new book is Strengthen Your Business, Fail-Proof Strategies for Small Business. He tells us of his life successes and failures that have made him and his clients so successful. Over the years, Bob has brought 77 companies back from the brink and change them into thriving, profitable businesses. His energy is amazing, and at 74, he proves that you can still have a great deal to give others if you just try. His suggestions are easy to understand and very helpful. One insight struck me was that most companies do not have a plan. The old Chinese proverb says, if you don't know where you're going, then any road will take you there, is true today. Bob Bethel's book, Strengthen Your Business, can be found at Amazon.com or can be ordered at your local bookstore. This has been Dan Perkins with your Recalculating.biz featured book.
Marcus Lemonis, J.D. Powers, and John Scully, and 100 other presidents and experts contributed to Recalculating the book. Why did all these people agree to contribute to the book? I'm Don Mazzella, and I'm the editorial director of Small Business Digest. And for 20 years, we have been offering small business leaders information and data to increase profits. Recalculating the book was named the best small business book by the Independent Press Association. Whether you need help with marketing, staffing, finance, operations, technology, or many other subjects, they're all here in Recalculating the book. They're now available at Amazon at a reduced cost. We've also created the radio program Recalculating on Recalculating.biz.
Want to know more about health savings accounts for your company or yourself? Go to 2hsa.com and get a free employer's primer. Health savings accounts are a cost-effective way of offering health care benefits to your employees and yourself. HSAs build retirement funds for your employees, improve morale, and reduce your health care benefit cost. For a free employer guide to HSAs, go to 2hsa.com. That's 2hsa.com.
Hello, I'm Dan Perkins, the co-host of Recalculating, and I just found out that I'm a type 2 diabetic. I don't know about you, but I was scared. I went to the diabetes classes at the hospitals and was overwhelmed with all of the information. I'm not a doctor. I'm a diabetic looking for a better way to treat my diabetes. It's important to me to try and treat my diabetes with a minimal amount of drugs. I found the Diabetic Solution Kit. It's a proven system used by over 300,000 people that help them balance their blood sugar, lower their A1C, and treat diabetes at the root cause. When you follow the simple instructions, the Solution Kit could help you get off of drugs, and it may even alleviate your need for daily insulin shots with your doctor's approval. If you're looking for an alternative in treating your diabetes, then you need to consider the Diabetic Solution Kit. I know it helped me, and maybe it can help you. Go to recalculating.biz and look for the Solution Kit link. Click on it and learn more.
My co-host, Dan Perkins, is on assignment, but we are fortunate enough to have one of our most enjoyable guests, Heather Wagenhals. She's here to talk about scams, nefarious people, and their ilk. Heather, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me back.
Heather, first tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I am a subject matter expert in personal finance, and on my Unlock Your Wealth Today TV show, we take a biology-based approach to success, and we provide tools to help you build your wealth, health, wisdom, and how to enjoy all sorts of pleasurable pursuits once you start accumulating that money. And in addition to that, with my biology-based approach to success, I also do identity theft risk management. I've been a victim since I was, before I was even old enough to use my credit. I had relatives using my credit. And so I have become, over the years, my own personal identity theft risk management specialist. But I noticed a need in the industry when I was doing mortgages and real estate that all of these people were having issues that shouldn't have been having issues. These people paid their bills on time. They got up, they went to work every day, they had consistent income, they saved, but they had challenges on their credit that had nothing to do with them. And so that's when I pursued the Certified Identity Theft Risk Management Specialist designation from the Institute for Consumer Financial Education. And what a boon that has been for me, because over the past 10 years or so since I've earned that designation, we've been able to really save people by showing them the simple things that they can do each and every day to avoid identity theft, frauds, and scams. And it actually evolved into its own website website, moneycreditandyou.com, where you can get the latest tips and tricks to help you avoid identity theft, frauds, and scams.
Okay, but before we go further, so you in fact help people conserve and grow their retirement planning, and also find ways of preventing people from taking their money away. Would that sum it up?
No, sort of. I don't specifically tell them what to invest in, but I help people get out of their own way when it comes to effective decision making, because that's usually the challenge that people have. On my show, we teach a physiology first mentality. If you are stressed out, overworked, undernourished, and have 8 million things going on around you that keep you in this reactionary survival mode, there's no way that you can physically make effective decisions to get out of your own way. And so I give people tools and resources to help them clear what's on their plate mentally and be able to address things in a systematic fashion. So whether they're making $10 or $10,000 an hour, they'll be able to manage their money consistently and effectively and make the right decisions that's right for them and their risk tolerance and their age group with any professional financial advisor out there.
Well, let's start there because I found it fascinating. How do you? Can you give us 2, 3 examples of how you can help people get out of their own way? God knows I need it, so I'm sure there's others around there that need it.
So as I'm sitting here listening to you, you say, as we're talking, and I'm doing this as an observation of the physiology first, you already sound overwhelmed before you start talking about it. Do you notice that?
Yes, I am. At this point, I am.
Okay, see, so right there, that sense of overwhelm, it creates a fight or flight response. All right, so now we're in survival mode, and so the brain, evolved over time, and if we think about it in really simple terms, I have these, what I call the 3 amigos. And so our first brain is our I do, and that stands for your initial decision officer. And all he does is keep you safe. His only goal is survival in this moment. He doesn't care what happens next week, next month, or next year. He only cares about what's happening right now. And that state of overwhelm that you're in is not allowing him to be resourceful. He can only go to what he instinctively knows through his DNA or what's been trained and patterned in. And so when we're in that state, we cannot use past memories to help us evolve our thought and, when I was in this situation before, I did this and it worked. And it definitely can't get us up to our third brain where Logic Larry lives, where our reasoning skills are and our powers of critical thinking are. So we get stuck in this rut, and then we keep telling ourselves this story over and over. Well, I tried to hire people, and I tried this, and I tried that. And we get overwhelmed. And so my thought to you would be to suggest that you find a way that you can set aside your past challenges and focus on what's ahead. What happens when we have to sell something, whether it's where to go to dinner with our spouse, our kids doing their homework and making their bed, or an actual job where we have to ask for money, and that's part of the terror right there, is asking for money, because we don't have the self-worth to say that I am valued and this, what I'm asking you is actually a bargain for the value that I'm bringing. And so that's part of what hangs us up when it comes to asking for things, specifically for money. If we couple money challenges from our past, from our childhood or imprinting, that compounds that. So what we need to do is remember, in any persuasion, we are already at no. Because unless somebody says yes, nothing changes. So if this rejection, this fear of rejection, of being hurt, attacks our survival mode. So that's what keeps us from getting on the phone and dialing for dollars to make it happen. So we make excuses. We partially, totally try to delegate, but we can't ever find anybody good enough, or we can't trust them that they'll do what they said they're going to do. And because we're in survival mode, it doesn't occur to us to negotiate some stopgaps and performance requirements for that draw up front. Like, I'm going to give you this amount of money, and it comes off any of the ads, and you have this much time, or I get a refund. communication is 100% each party. And so if they're walking away, you have to, always assume it's you, so you can do an effective evaluation. You have to set aside performance anxieties, again, set aside all of this stuff about, value and worth and all of that. And you have to say, okay, so if communication is 100% my responsibility, not to get my point across, but rather to elicit the right results, and the result I elicited in this presentation was they walked away, what do I need to alter or change to get them to say what I want them to say? So you're either communicating too much or you're not communicating enough to persuade them to go forward with you. And that's what you have to look at. But if you are busy being stressed out or emotional or exhausted or overwhelmed by this prospect, you're not going to be resourceful enough to be able to look at this, because you're going to say, it's them, it's not me. But it's just your anxiety over the whole process and your fear of whatever it is. And for me, I've always lived with the challenge of not being good enough. It started when I was a kid because we grew up poor. We didn't have a dad. It was in the 70s when there was a lot of discrimination because the family unit was really important. So people made fun of my mother because she was divorced with 2 kids. They made fun of us because she was divorced with 2 kids. And then they just made fun of us because we had no money and we couldn't do what everybody else could do. And so I was always in my mind like disadvantaged, and so I was always struggling to prove myself. Now, forget the fact that I have a Mensa level IQ. Forget the fact that I am extremely physically agile and talented and I could play any sport. Forget the fact that I am above average good looking on the attractiveness scale. And because I grew up poor, I had to learn how to be resourceful from early on. So forget all of those things for just a moment, all right? Because all of those things make me just fully capable of doing just about anything. But the thought in my head that I might not be good enough makes me an overachiever. But that exact thought impairs me when I'm trying to persuade somebody to buy into myself. Because when you sell a show, you're not just selling an idea, you're selling you. And so that's the ultimate type of rejection. If you were selling golf clubs for somebody else and they said no, you'd be like, whatever. They rejected the golf clubs. But when you're selling your show, now you're selling you. And on a subconscious level, you might be interpreting the rejection personally, and that's what makes you fearful. So you're not setting up your presentation for your success. You're validating your lack of self-worth.
You're right on target. And I'd love to continue this conversation, but the original thought was telling our audience some of the scams and how to avoid it.
Let's talk about scams. So just like we illustrated with our physiology first mentality, falling for scams has little to do with the technology and everything to do with our ability to perceive a scam happening to us so we can stay in our most resourceful state so we can address this scam. Because all they've done is taken those door-to-door salesmen and the snake oil salesmen, and they've used another technology to help scam us. So let's talk about some of the scams that are approaching number one. So last year, the number one scam was tax scams. But right now, currently, phishing email scams are the top thing that all of these antivirus software and security softwares are coming up with as the biggest scam so far. More than a third of all security incidents on networks and personal computers start with a phishing email or a malicious attachment sent to a company employee or an individual. And this is according to a new report from F-Secure that analyzes all of this data that these security watch companies come up with. So the way it is you get an email. It looks familiar. It's got a sound-alike name. Maybe they're even using some code that's spoofing a familiar email, and you think it's your buddy, and they send you, hey, watch this. And usually they're the one that are always sending you those really funny videos, right? So you think nothing of it. You click on it, and the video doesn't work. You click on the video 50 times. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. But it did. You just don't think it works in the way you expected it to. And what you've just done is you've released a virus on your computer, or if you're at work, on your company's computer network. And so phishing scams are some of the biggest challenges that we have today. And these are one of the things that we have to be paying attention to. So right now, that's kind of one of the top scams. Now, you're going to be surprised when I tell you what number 2 is, because you'd think we'd figured it out by now. You want to take a guess what number 2 is?
In the interest of time, no. Just keep going. You're wonderful this way.
Okay.
Keep going.
All right, the oldest and probably most popular one people still fall for, and that's the Nigerian 419 scam, which it's named after the section of Nigeria's criminal code which bans this practice. And what you usually do is you get an emotional plea for help. It's an email, it's a letter, in the physical format, a fax, or now they're using text messaging and even social media private communications now. And it can sound like a government member, a businessman, or somebody of high importance. And they're asking you to help them retrieve a large amount of money because they're having challenges or having to escape, they're on the lam, and whatever variety of this that there might be. And what they're doing is they're asking you to wire them money. And people still fall for this. People, a lot of it now we're starting to see that because of the proliferation of this, most younger people aren't falling for this. But what we do have is what we're finding is that we're seeing a high number of the elderly that are what they call the silver surfers. These folks are online, but they're not super tech savvy or hip to all of these scams, and they're the ones that are falling for these emotional pleas. The third one, and probably the one where you want to stop, is greeting card scams. And we get a lot of greeting cards in our email, and some of them, they have all kind of funny sayings. Maybe there's a personalized message from your friend, and they're loaded with links that are malicious, and they're going to take you to websites that are going to scour your computer for data or put malicious software on it or hold your computer for ransom. And so these are all things that, while it's cute to receive these greeting cards, don't click on any links. If you decide to open it, don't touch any links to protect yourself.
Couldn't agree with you more. When I see them, and I see 3 or 4 a day of these things, and I just delete them. But you're absolutely right. We just heard over the weekend of somebody, and I was just in the Microsoft store, and there was somebody bringing in their machine who had fallen for such a scam, and it was ransomware, and they were saying literally there's nothing they can do.
Yeah. Once it gets on and connects to the server, you're kind of SOL, as they say.
Well, it's still surprising me that people, given all of the publicity, still fall for this. Well, why is that, Heather?
It's exactly what we discussed earlier. It's a physiology first thing. If you think about it, you get up in the morning, you trip over the cat to let out the dog, all right? So you stub your toe, so you're already starting off in a rotten mood. Then your spouse forgot to pick up the dry cleaning, and so you have nothing to wear. And then, you drop your kids off at school and realize that they forgot their instruments for band practice in the car, so you got to double back. Then, as you're late for work, you get a flat tire. So all these things build up in our head that just keep filling our conscious mind of stuff that's not relevant to the rest of our functioning of the day, yet we carry this through. And so when we see that next thing that's promising us a lottery winning or escape from our debt, it's the panacea. It's the bromide we're looking for to make our lives better. And so we go for it. Even though we know better, we don't do better.
Let me interrupt you. We're talking with Heather Wagenhals. Heather, your website for people?
If you want to learn how to protect yourself against identity theft, frauds, and scams, visit my website at moneycreditandyou.com. And if you'd like to see my TV show and learn about my biology-based approach to success, unlockyourwealthtoday.com.
Say it again slower, Heather.
Unlockyourwealthtoday.com. today.com.
I'm going to go there myself tonight and look it over. Heather, we have 3 minutes left. In your time together that you obviously pulled yourself up, what are 2 or 3 things that you would say to our audience are important to success?
Dan Perkins here from Recalculating.biz with your small business tip of the day. Should I grow my business or stay the size that I am? One of the most difficult decisions about a small business is, should I try to grow it? And if I want to grow, what is the best way to do it? If you look at the internet, you can find lots of advice on how to expand your business. So here's your Recalculating.biz small business tip of the day. Go to the SBA.gov website and you'll find 10 ideas of how to grow your business. They're not in order of importance, they're just 10 ideas. Some may be more suitable, others may not for you and your business. The one that struck me was add another store. My brother-in-law started with 1 pizza shop, and over the last 15 years he's grown to 5. You may not have a storefront, but a service business. So look at your competitors and see if they might be willing to sell or merge with you. This has been Dan Perkins with your Recalculating.biz small business tip of the day. Dan Perkins here from Recalculating.biz with your small business tip of the day. How is your vision? I'm not talking about your eyesight, but rather, can you see the changes coming in your business or industry? The ability to see what's coming can give you an edge over your competition. Industry magazines can be a great help to see changes coming to your business. You get the magazines because you belong to a group. Use the resource of your group or association to keep yourself current. You're paying for it anyway, why not use this resource? If you keep yourself abreast of what's happening, you will be able to make the changes to enhance your opportunity to grow your business. So here's your Recalculating.biz small business tip of the day. The next time you get one of those membership magazines in the mail, sit down and read it cover to cover. You just might uncover a new opportunity. I'm Dan Perkins from Recalculating.biz with your small business tip of the day. Dan Perkins here for Recalculating for Small Business with your tip of the day. Should you belong to a local marketing network? One area of potential business is other small business owners through marketing networks. These groups usually meet once or twice a month for lunch and discussions. Sometimes the group will invite a guest speaker to talk about how they are building their brand. People in different businesses generally go and make up these groups. If you have a computer problem, perhaps one of the members of your group can fix your problem, or at least tell you about somebody they've used to fix their problems. Sometimes members of your group can use your product or services. So here's your Recalculating for Small Business tip of the day. Reach out and ask your fellow business friends if they belong to a marketing group. And if they do, tell them you'd like to go. Shop around and find a group or 2 that you like. You'll make new friends and maybe find new customers. This is Dan Perkins with your Recalculating Small Business tip of the day.
In New York this week, 500 managers and bankers from across the fintech world met to discuss the rising use of online financial resource companies. It was the latest of a number of such concaves across the country. What does it mean for small business leaders? Speaker after speaker droned on about the funds available to grow their small businesses. Other panelists talked about the ease such companies are making the loan process. Finding the money to grow can be as short as an hour. Some speakers said the average was 3 days versus going to a more traditional banking resource, which could take up to 3 months. But as one speaker pointed out, small businesses can suffer in one way from the fintech revolution. The personal banking touch that puts the small business leader in physical proximity to the banker, that personal touch that can come in handy should growth plans not work out exactly as expected, is not there. There is an old saying, when you owe enough to the bank, you own the bank. Most banks won't let that happen, but having a personal relationship can ease some issues. Fintech bankers are about doing everything over the internet. For those times when the small business succeeds, this works great. But what happens if they don't? It's harder without that personal touch.
Recalculating.
Dan Perkins here for Songs and Stories for Soldiers with your Veterans Tip of the Day. Did you know that the suicide rate for women vets is 12 times that of their sisters in civilian life? Did you know that 1 in 4 women vets feel uncomfortable about talking to people about their mental health issues? Did you know almost 600,000 women vets in America are suffering from PTSD? It's time to help. It's time for all of us to encourage our sisters, mothers, and wives to get help by contacting their local VA hospital, clinic, or community-based health care center. So if you know a woman vet that is suffering, go to va.gov and find their nearest VA facility. This has been Dan Perkins of Songs and Stories for Soldiers.us with your Veterans Tip of the Day.
Tell me, Dan, tell me about your latest book.
My current book that's coming out, I should say, is Why Can't Grammy Remember Me? And it's really the first book written for children between the ages of 9 and 12 and their families dealing with dementia. Dementia is a growing problem with the elderly in the United States and around the world, and we are not very well informed about what's going on, what's happening. So I wrote this book in the form of a mystery, and I have 2 little girls, 9 and 12, who have a magical power to seem to be able to find things that are lost. And so they go to their dads and moms and they say, we work all over the neighborhood helping people find things, and we seem to find things. And their dad says, yes, you have a magical talent to do that. And they said, we'd like to start a business to see if we can help other people. So they decided to start a business. The 2 girls' names are Hudson and Charlotte, and they start H&C's Lost and Found. If you've lost it, we find it. And so they build a business, and they convince the dads to build them an office and a treehouse in the backyard. And they get busy making posters and flyers trying to get customers. And their dads take them downtown, and they put them in the windows and on the telephone poles and light poles. And they go home, and first week goes by, and nobody comes. And the second week and third week, and nobody comes. They're really, really dejected. And the 4th week comes, and there's a knock at the door, and they walk over and open the door, and there's a young man standing there with one of their flyers in his hands. And he says to them, my dad says the reason why my Grammy can't remember me is because she's lost her memory. And your flyer says you find things that are lost. Can you find my Grammy's memory? Well, they don't know anything about memory, so they take his name and they go see their dads to see what can happen. And the story evolves into how they learn about what dementia is and what's going on in the body when somebody has dementia. And then they decide, while they can't find their customer's memory, they can help him build the tools to retain her in his memory. And so at the end of the book, there are about 10 to 12, 13 things that families can do together to work on to preserve the memory of Grandma and Grandpa, so the generations can know who these people were. And that's the story.
What a great book. When will it be available, and how can people get it?
Well, it'll be available on Amazon.com. A lot of people who have read it, who've had moms and dads that have been stricken with Alzheimer's or dementia, tell me that they really now begin to understand what's happening in Grandma's brain. And we took a different approach. Rather than do the typical brain cross-section, I work with the artist, and we design highways in the brain. And there's a brain of one of the little girls and the brain of Grammy. They both have highways, roads, but the girl's brain, everything is green and go. Grammy's brain is full of no left turns, do not enter, stop, no right turns. So all of the messages that need to come from our brain get screwed up, and we can't function. Great illustrations, though. Wonderful illustrations.
Well, say goodbye, Dan.
All right.
Time for us to go.
Thank you for joining us. And by the way, if you didn't hear all of today's show, you can go to recalculating.biz, and you can pick up this show and past shows to expand your knowledge as becoming more successful entrepreneurs. Thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for joining us on Recalculating. We hope the information you received on today's episode was helpful to you in starting and growing your business. Please go to our website, recalculating.biz, to contact us, to listen to past shows, and see special offers. Until next time, remember, if you grow, we grow. Join us next week for more helpful ideas to make your business a great success. Recalculating, a program designed to help you be successful.